Just beyond Mathews, Virginia, and sitting on the bay, is a section of forest so old, yet the same to this day. Deep in the old house woods, ghosts are seen here along with many stories to tell. A woman whose love was lost at sea now warns of impending storms, simply with her yell. Pirate ships are witnessed floating on air and above the tree line. Their galleon ships are large, and they return to find the treasure they buried here from a previous time. They climb down on ladders to find their lost gold. The sounds of digging late at night are the stories that are told. Skeletal soldiers in armor appear. They look for their ships, sending witnesses fleeing in fear. While many say the tales of ghosts and buried treasure are as real as the sand on nearby Haven Beach, others say they are nothing more than falsehoods. One day you may find out for yourself, here in the old house woods.
Is this the King's Highway? I've lost my ship.
My buddy lives down there. There's a long winding road that goes to the woods till you get to his house, and you actually go through the old house woods, and he could see those orbs or whatever floating up from the ground going up to the sky. And
it was ninth grade. Yeah, it was ninth grade. I was playing JV basketball, and I couldn't drive yet. I was on my way home from the game. My mom was driving. And it was a clear night. It wasn't foggy or anything. And we got to get to our house, you had to drive all the way through the woods. And we got to the front of the woods, and again, it was a clear night, but at the entrance of the woods, the fog was so thick, Mom had to stop the car. We were just sitting there in the van looking at this wall of fog. It was so thick. We literally stopped the car. We're like, why is it so thick? I can't even see through that. Why is that fog there? And we were at, complete stop, sitting in front of the woods. And the fog just immediately, it dissipated extremely quickly. The fog was gone. And there were four, I don't know if you call them orbs. They were too big to be orbs, I would say. Oblong shapes, just translucent white oblong shapes, I would describe them. It wasn't the shape of a figure or a person or anything. It was just these oblong shapes. And there was 3 or 4 of them. And they floated to the top of the woods, and they were gone. And the fog was completely gone. The woods was clear again. So we both looked at each other what in the world was that? We started driving through the woods a little faster than usual because we didn't know what that was. We got halfway through, and the same thing happened. We had to stop again because there's another thick wall of fog. And then the same thing happened. We were sitting there. It dissipated, and the same thing. These oblong shapes floated to the top and disappeared. And we drove home. I never saw anything like that again. It was just that one night. And that was the most unusual thing I happened to see there in all my time living there.
Another buddy of mine stayed at his house, and he said one time the rocking chair in the living room was just rocking by itself, and his dog was just sitting there staring at it and would not leave it alone. He would just sit there and stare at it. Those were always the stories he would tell me about it.
One of the experiences that I do remember, it was the dead of winter. I would say 92, 93 maybe. I woke up, it had to have been 2 or 3 in the morning. I don't remember, it's been so long. But I woke up around 2 or 3. It was very cold outside, I do remember that. I turned over because I noticed that it seemed a light was coming through the hallway of where the bathroom and his brother's room was. I turned around and I noticed this 6-foot figure, a shadowy figure, standing in the doorway of the room I was staying in the hallway. I looked at it for a second. I got scared. I didn't know what to do. So I slowly rolled over, and I remember sweating profusely, just sweating, and it was cold outside, and the room wasn't that hot. I remember turning over, closing my eyes, and then I woke up. It was not a dream, because I remember it vividly, and it was just so real. That's one of the experiences that I encountered down in Mathews and Old House Woods. That house in that area just seems just has a weird feel to it. a very paranormal feel. You can't describe it all the time unless you see something or feel something. Another story, I remember walking by the kitchen and the rocking chair was rocking by itself, and he had a Labrador Retriever at the time, and the dog was just sitting on its hind legs, staring and growling at the chair when it was rocking back and forth.
Newport Comfort was a safe harbor for pirate ships. We got the history of that taking place, you know.
The ghost ship, it would just hover out over the bay and then disappear into the clouds. Now, I know if you see something, if you're on the water or the bay and you're looking at a ship from far away, it'll look like, it, especially if it's really big, it'll look like it's hovering above something. But this was like maybe 400 or 500 feet off the shoreline of Bayvon Beach, which is where Old House Woods is. You could really tell that, or the reports, that this thing was just hovering above the trees or above one of the sandbars that's out there in Bayvon Beach. We have heard foghorns, but I guess growing up on the water, you would hear them quite often. But my dad was in the Coast Guard, and he would never mention foghorns on ships in that modern time. This seemed like it was 150, 200 years old, the way that it sounds. I'm not sure if it was a tugboat or what, but it was just creepy. Very, very eerie things happened down there, and you could just feel it.
It was a man, he was fishing outside Rigby Island. There's not much there left of the island anymore, but he was anchored off Rigby Island fishing late at night. It was an all-night fishing trip. A lot of people just do that, you know, old-time Mathews, when people used to make a living off the water. And the story I always heard growing up, they saw a ship coming towards them, you know, right towards their small ship. And it was like, you know, a large, like Spanish galleon type ship. And, you know, they were thinking to themselves, hey, you know, this ship's going to swamp us. You know, we got to get out of here. But it said the ship kept getting closer, and it didn't stop. It barely missed them, but it didn't stop. And it was going towards Rigby Island. And instead of stopping or turning to avoid the island, it floated right over top the island and floated and anchored on top of the woods. And they were sitting in the little boat fishing, watching this, and they could see anchors and soldiers, you know, like Revolutionary era soldiers going down the ladder into the woods. And, you know, obviously, you know, kind of freaked them out, of course. And so they went home, you know, abandoned their fishing trip. And the story was heard when they got home, went inside the kitchen, and they saw their wife and children in there praying. And they just didn't even have to ask them what was wrong. They just, you know, they all knew. And the husband looked out of his house, out the window. He could still see the ship over top the woods.
Me and my buddy drove down there, just riding around, and I remember it was really clear night, full moon, and we got out of his car and walked up to the edge of the beach and just kind of looked out to see if anyone was out there, if anyone was hanging out or doing anything. And I remember we looked out over the water, and I mean, clear as day, I could see a boat with tall masts, and I mean, it looked like it was like in the sunlight. I mean, in the shine of the moon was on the water, and it looked like a cloud shaped as a boat. And I looked at it, and I looked at him, and we didn't say a word, and we just turned around and just ran back to the car. And we got in the car, and we just started laughing, and we got about 5 minutes up the road, and we started talking about it. But it was like, he saw the same thing as I saw, and it was just, I don't know if we went back. I don't think we did, but no. But it was just crazy to see.
I know that the storm woman, the reason she existed was because her husband was on a ship and got lost at sea because of a storm, and that's why she started being warning everybody that a storm was coming.
Yeah, as the legend goes, it's a woman that lost her husband to a bad storm in the area, and, you know, before a nor'easter or a bad storm comes in the area, you know, legend has it you can hear her screaming in the woods, warning other fishermen that a storm's coming to hope to prevent those fishermen from reaching the same fate that her husband did.
She would just fly and hover above the trees, just like screeching like a banshee. I don't know if she was protecting the wooded area, trying to find somebody she lost, or what she was doing. But the screaming, I've read that it's a very, very painful shriek. Like, it'll just bother you.
How she met her in, I don't know. But that's the legend of it, is that she was warning others of an approaching storm because of her loss in her life. I'll tell you the story that my daughter told me about at Hayden Beach. She was there with some friends at night, and this woman came up and was looking in the windows of a car and stuff like that. Well, there was no woman. I mean, there was nobody there. But she saw this storm woman. And like I say, she didn't scare my daughter when my daughter saw her. It was more just she was there, and then she wasn't.
I know one, it was a guy who was duck hunting, and he was kind of far away. He thought he saw some ducks, raised his gun to shoot, and turns out they weren't ducks, they were helmets. And the helmets came out of the swamp, and it was like helmets of soldiers.
The soldiers in the woods, there's been claims that you can hear their armor clanging. Now, I'm not sure if these were the skeletons or just like the soldiers walking around trying to find or bury their treasure or guard it. But there have been reports of the clanging of the metal lasting for a few minutes or so.
Like horse and buggy days. And the story was like a wagon wheel. The guy on this horse and buggy, his wheel broke. And he was, trying to fix it. Somebody tapped him on the shoulder. And he looked over, and instead of a person, it was it was an apparition of a revolutionary soldier. And the soldier just, was staring at him in horror. And the soldier said, "Have you seen the King's Highway?" I don't know what he was referring to exactly, but and he said he passed out from fear, and that's another story I always heard.
They would float through the woods or coming into that canal and taking that, either looking for that treasure or taking the treasure in there. I've heard stories both ways on that.
So legend has it that, of course, these soldiers, I'm not sure if they're revolutionary, Civil War, or pirates, buried this treasure in Old House Woods near some place called the Cow Hole or the Cow Pit. I guess that's where farmers back then would raise their cows. But now it's just like a boggy marsh area. I think there's a small bridge to get to it some way, but that hasn't been maintained for years, so it's probably rotted away. And if anybody tries to go and find the treasure, they get scared off by something. It's never been found. It could still be there. We don't know exactly what it is, the precise location, because like I said, they always get scared off if they try to go in there and find it.
Like one time I told you about the old cow hole. It wouldn't freeze. Now, some of the stories were that's where the treasure was buried, and it was supposed to be bottomless. Well, tell that to a kid, and the first thing he's going to do is find out if it's bottomless. So we were walking in it, but it never froze. Everything else, the whole woods or every ditch would be frozen, but that cow hole wasn't. Why is that? But anyway, so if they were running them aground and taking cargo, if they run aground during a storm, people have bound to die because of that. Their spirit would attach to the cargo and got brought into Old House Woods, and that could be the basis of every story ever told. I don't believe that there's gold buried somewhere in there, but who knows? Who knows? It's too many stories not to be some truth to it. in watching ghost stories on TV and stuff like that, one of the first things that they'll say is that a ghost or a spirit will attach themselves to an item. That whole woods, the roads and the woods, that whole area, it's just, you get that funny feeling. Whether it's from hearing the stories or what, but you goosebumps on your back and chills and stuff. I mean, it's real.